Zurich sat back in his chair, staring at the transmission, puzzled. His fingers hovered over the control panel, but no matter how many times he cycled through the data, it remained unchanged. This can't be, he muttered. Having witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, Zurich had seen the might of advanced species wielding weaponry capable of obliterating entire planets. He understood tactics, warfare, and the power of strategy. But what he saw in humanity, that was something entirely different. Send the fleet, Zurich ordered, his voice steady despite the confusion gnawing at him. The response was immediate, as it always was. The colossal ships of the Karachi fleet began their advance toward the human sector. Captain, Econ's voice crackled over the comms. We've intercepted strange transmissions. The humans are sending broadcasts that are unsettling. They've been saying things like, say hi to the big guy, and let's make a mess big enough to make him scream. Zurich's brows furrowed in disbelief. These humans, who had somehow cracked the secret of space travel, were broadcasting messages filled with reckless bravado, like some primitive tribe daring to challenge their superior in an arena they couldn't possibly comprehend. Unbelievable, he muttered, shaking his head. They're mocking protocol. Zurich turned his attention back to his console. Tell me everything we know about them. Captain, we've picked up information about their weapon systems. Econ continued. They seem to think their planes can take on our fleet. Planes? Zurich chuckled, unable to hide his amusement. Are they serious? Do they truly believe their primitive aircraft could match the might of our forces? They're using projectile-based crafts, Captain, Econ explained. Zurich's laughter bubbled up again. Projectiles? These are their weapons. How quaint. These humans are utterly naive if they think they stand a chance in space combat. He shook his head and then gave his orders. Deploy interceptors. Let's see what these planes can really do. Meanwhile, as the Karachi fleet made its way toward Earth's solar system, the humans were preparing for their own first contact, though their approach was anything but organized. Private Marshall Jackson stood near the edge of the airstrip, his helmet secured firmly on his head. Tom, he called out over the deafening noise of the fighter jets. You ever think maybe we're going about this all wrong? Tom, standing nearby, gave him a look that could only be described as unimpressed. What do you mean, Jackson? We shoot first, ask questions later. That's how we do things. But we don't even know who we're up against, Jackson argued. What if they're friendly? Tom scoffed, brushing off the idea. Friendly? Nah, I'm more interested in showing them what America's got. Space bugs don't scare me. Just as Jackson opened his mouth to reply, the ground suddenly shook violently beneath their feet. The engines of the fleet roared to life, sending waves of vibration through the airstrip. Jackson gripped his gear tighter, a sense of absurdity settling in. They had no idea what was about to unfold. On board the Karachi flagship, Zurich leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the vast emptiness of space. The human fleet was moving closer, and he could hardly contain his anticipation. Rarely did he encounter such a bizarre species, unpredictable, strange, and so very different. They may have had their ships, but what intrigued Zurich most wasn't their technology. No, it was the rumors. Humanity didn't just fight, they had something else, something called tactics. And Zurich, despite his confidence in the power of his fleet, couldn't help but wonder just what kind of challenge these humans would bring to the table. Some reports suggested that these humans, arrogant, reckless humans, had somehow discovered a way to manipulate weapons in ways no other species had ever managed. Zurich found it hard to believe. No species, not even the most powerful in the galaxy, had ever done what these humans were rumored to be doing. We're nearing their operational base, Econ reported, his voice steady but tinged with anticipation. Zurich's fingers twitched, itching to issue the order. He could almost taste victory, yet something within him urged patience. A great leader knew when to wait. Just a few more moments, and he would unleash the strike. Meanwhile, Marshall Jackson sat at the controls of his fighter jet, his nerves on edge as he studied the cockpit displays. Here we go, he muttered, half to himself, half to the universe. Was he talking about the alien threat or the anxious pit in his stomach? It didn't matter. This was humanity's first official contact with another species, and the weight of the entire country's expectations was on their shoulders. Then, the sky above Earth's atmosphere erupted in a dazzling light, a series of fast-moving objects rapidly descending. Marshall swore under his breath. Looks like we've got ourselves a party invite, he said grimly. The Karachi fleet dropped out of warp space, emerging into Earth's orbit. Zurich's eyes gleamed with anticipation, but just as he was about to issue the order to strike, something unexpected happened. The human ships, if they could even be called that, shot up from the planet's surface at speeds that defied all logic. No shields, no heavy armor, just these small jets darting erratically, weaving through space as if they had no concept of proper combat protocol. Zurich blinked, completely thrown off guard. This wasn't what he had prepared prepared for. Were they out of their minds? This wasn't how battle was fought. Ready to engage? Ikon's voice crackled in his ear. Zurich hesitated, a rare moment of doubt. Hold fire, he said, raising a hand as if to stall the inevitable. Let's see what they do next. Time to show these aliens what Earth's got, Jackson yelled, his voice rising above the roar of the jet engines. His fighter shot into the air, followed by dozens of others, all executing a coordinated maneuver. The sky above was filled with jets, swarming toward the Karachi fleet. Jackson's heart raced as he steered his fighter toward the incoming alien ships, a grin spreading across his face. All right, let's have some fun. Zurich watched, his mind spinning in disbelief as the human jets danced around his fleet. It was pure madness. They weren't firing in any structured manner. They weren't following tactics, formations, or anything resembling military discipline. They zigzagged, looped, and weaved as if they were trying to crash into each other on purpose. Zurich's teeth clenched, confusion clouding his mind. What was this? He'd seen countless military strategies, perfectly executed maneuvers, but this was chaos. One of the human jets came dangerously close to the flagship, firing wildly in an unpredictable pattern. Zurich blinked. How could this be happening? The shots weren't precise, nor were they coordinated. Yet somehow, every shot found its mark. Are they playing a game? Zurich muttered under his breath. His face twitched in agitation. This wasn't warfare, it wasn't anything he recognized. It was nonsensical. As the human jets continued their erratic movements, dodging and weaving in impossible patterns, Zurich's thoughts raced. Each pass the humans made seemed to damage his shields. Ikon's voice filled the air, rattling off data, but the reports made no sense. These humans weren't using any recognizable combat techniques. They were just flying around, shooting at random. And then, as if to confirm Zurich's disbelief, a human jet performed a maneuver so wild it seemed like the pilot had lost control. The jet flipped and spun uncontrollably, then crashed into the side of one of the Karachi cruisers. The explosion rocked the fleet. Did that just happen? Ikon asked, his voice filled with shock as he stared at the screen. Zurich was speechless for a moment. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He couldn't comprehend it. What were these humans? Instead of responding with a command, Zurich reached over and activated the comm system. Human leader, are you there? He asked, his voice laced with frustration. Static crackled, followed by a confident voice that made his blood boil. This is Lieutenant Turner of the United States Air Force. Can you hear me? The tone was cocky, unbothered, and brimming with arrogance. Zurich could hardly believe what he was hearing. Who are you, and what exactly are you doing to my fleet? Zurich demanded, his patience thinning. Oh, nothing much, Turner replied nonchalantly, as if the situation was no more than a casual game. Just trying to knock some sense into these oversized toasters you call ships. You guys can take a hit, but trust me, we're just getting started. The background noise on the comm was a chaotic mixture of shouting, laughter, and the roar of engines. It felt less like a battle and more like a wild celebration. Zurich clenched his fists in frustration. I do not understand your tactics, Zurich muttered, feeling the heat of his confusion mounting. Don't worry, Turner responded, dripping with sarcasm. We're just warming up. You'll see what we're really made of soon. Zurich stood silent for a moment, trying to process the ridiculousness of it all. His brain struggled to make sense of the situation, but just then, things took another bizarre turn. One of the human jets, a particularly loud, reckless one, made another pass at a Karachi destroyer. But this time, it didn't fire. Instead, the jet swooped dangerously close to the ship, buzzing it like a wasp. A few moments later, a message popped up on Zurich's screen. The font was sickeningly cheerful. The words read, *, nice ship you got there. Want to trade? *. Zurich could feel the pressure building in his exoskeleton. He was used to invaders who were ruthless, efficient, and tactical, not this circus of chaos. These humans had no rules. They had no sense of self-preservation. They were unpredictable. Get ready. Turner's voice crackled again through the comm. You're about to see why humans are the greatest species in the galaxy. Buckle up. Before Zurich could process this new wave of nonsense, the entire human fleet, if it could even be called that, launched a barrage of missiles toward the Karachi fleet. Zurich's eyes widened in shock. It wasn't the size or strength of the missiles that threw him off. It was the absurdity of the launch itself. The missiles weren't aimed. They were just thrown into space. Some veered off to the side, others spiraled erratically, and some didn't even make it out of Earth's atmosphere. It was chaos. And yet, against Against all odds, every single missile hit its target. Did you see that? Jackson's voice yelled over the comm. I told you they wouldn't know what hit M. He maneuvered his jet into a dive, narrowly dodging a Karachi interceptor, which exploded in the distance. Yeah, and we didn't even have to aim. These guys are hopeless. The human fleet was all over the place. No formations, no coordination, just pure chaos. And somehow it was working. The alien ships were disoriented, their crew scrambling to respond. Jackson's jet streaked past a Karachi cruiser, firing off rounds without precision. He had no idea if he'd hit anything, but the ship shook as if he had. That was enough for him. Back aboard the Karachi flagship, Zurich was seething. His patience had run dry. He slammed his fists down on the console. What is happening? How are they doing this? His voice, once steady and composed, now trembled with panic. Ikon, Zurich called, his eyes darting to his tactical officer, who was desperately trying to make sense of the chaos on his screens. Ikon was working furiously, his fingers flying across the console. Captain, they're using everything. They're not following any patterns. No logic, no coordination. He hesitated, his voice faltering. It's like, they're making it up as they go. Impossible, Zurich roared. There must be a pattern. There has to be some kind of order to this madness. Ikon fell silent, unable to offer any explanation. The chaos continued, and Zurich's grip on control began to slip. Zurich watched in growing horror as another barrage of human missiles slammed into the hull of his flagship, obliterating another defense system. The chaos was mounting with each passing second, and his fleet was slowly crumbling under the relentless human assault. The once formidable Karachi fleet was beginning to buckle beneath the weight of the unpredictable human onslaught. Back on Earth, Marshal Jackson's eyes were locked on the screen in front of him. His voice crackled with excitement. All right, boys, this is it. Let's show 'em how it's done. He banked his jet hard and pushed the throttle to full speed. Tom's voice came through the radio, filled with doubt. What's the plan, Jackson? This is getting nuts. Keep flying, keep firing, just don't think about it. Jackson shouted, laughing with abandon. He didn't know if they were winning or not. He didn't care. This was the part of the battle where tactics didn't matter. It was all instinct and chaos, and to Jackson it was pure fun. Meanwhile, aboard the Karachi flagship, Zurich's patience had finally worn thin. Launch all remaining interceptors, he barked, his voice sharp. Get in there and crush them. But just as he issued the order, the humans made their next unthinkable move. The entire human fleet broke formation. Each ship veered off in a completely different direction, firing at random, hitting whatever they could. Zurich's fleet was scattered, unable to form any kind of defensive line. His once formidable forces were sitting ducks. Zurich stared at the screen, stunned by the madness unfolding before him. The humans weren't following any strategy, no formations, no synchronized attacks. They were winning with sheer, chaotic unpredictability. He could barely comprehend it. Another human jet, piloted by Lieutenant Turner, streaked through space, ignoring every defensive maneuver. It collided directly with a Karachi destroyer, the impact so violent that the explosion sent shockwaves throughout Zurich's flagship. His console blinked with error messages, and his stomach dropped. Captain, Ikon's voice came through, filled with hesitation. No, Zurich interrupted, his voice a low growl. No more excuses. I want those ships gone. Now! His eyes flicked over to the tactical display, where the human fleet had splintered into complete chaos. The ships were moving in every direction, and none of it made sense. Yet, despite the madness, the humans were tearing apart his fleet. Their bizarre, uncoordinated attacks were working. Zurich's mind raced as he began to realize the impossible truth. These humans weren't just unpredictable, they were thriving in the madness. It was like they were built for it. Sir, they've disabled our primary weapons, Ikon reported, disbelief in his voice. The remaining human fighters. Shut up, Ikon, Zurich snapped, his patience shattered. I don't need more reports. I need results. The flagship shook again, and Zurich's frustration reached its peak. But then, in the back of his mind, something started to click. The humans weren't following any of the combat strategies he knew. They weren't relying on precision or advanced tactics. No, they were relying on something else. Instinct. Back on Earth, Marshal Jackson was still laughing. You seeing this, Tom? They're falling apart. Tom's voice came over the comm, wary. Yeah, but don't get cocky. We're not done yet. They've still got firepower left. I don't care, Jackson said confidently. We've got one shot. We can make this count. They'd just blown through another Karachi cruiser, and Jackson could feel the end was near. The aliens were starting to retreat, but there was one last last thing they had to do. All right, listen up, everyone. Jackson's voice rang out over the open channel. We're going for the big guy, the flagship. Tom's incredulous response crackled over the radio. What, the flagship? That thing's massive. We're supposed to hit that with what? With everything we've got, Jackson said, his tone steely. We end this now. Aboard the Karaki flagship, Zurich watched in disbelief as his fleet, once a symbol of invincibility, disintegrated under the humans' wild, unpredictable onslaught. The comms channels were filled with panicked voices, as his ships either retreated or fell apart under the barrage. The humans had somehow turned the tables. It was as though they were enjoying the chaos they'd unleashed. Then, just as the situation seemed completely out of control, Zurich's tactical systems registered a shift. A human squadron was approaching at high speed, and it was clear this wasn't just a handful of reckless jets anymore. This was organized chaos. Captain, they're heading straight for us, Ian shouted in panic. They've locked onto the flagship. Zurich's eyes widened in realization. No, he muttered, his voice tinged with disbelief. They can't be serious, but they were. Leading the charge was Jackson, his determination palpable. Every muscle in his body was tense with anticipation. Here we go, guys. We either end it here or we're going down in a blaze of glory. No second chances. Go for the engines. If we take out their power, they're done for. His instructions were clear and concise. This was no time for banter. The human jets, still darting through space in their erratic style, now came together in a final formation. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't coordinated, but it didn't need to be. All that mattered was the target. Marshal Jackson gripped the controls tightly, guiding his jet toward the flagship. The distance between the two shrank rapidly as the Karaki ship fired on them. The human jets dodged the blasts by inches. Hold steady, Jackson muttered, his eyes fixed on the approaching target. Just a little closer, the Karaki flagship loomed large ahead, an imposing force in space, but it was vulnerable, and for the first time since the battle began, Zurich felt a cold dread in his chest. His mind raced as the jets continued to close in on his ship. No! Zurich shouted, slamming his fist on the console. Stop them! Destroy those jets, now! But it was too late. Jackson's jet made its move, pulling sharply to the side and unleashing a barrage of missiles aimed directly at the flagship's engines. The explosion was immediate. The Karaki ship trembled under the force, its lights flickering as the damage set in. Then, everything fell into chaos. The once proud ship, a symbol of Karaki might, was reduced to a smoldering husk floating in space. One by one, the remaining Karaki ships fell silent, their systems failing under the humans' relentless assault. For a long moment, there was only silence. And then, a message appeared on Zurich's console. It was so absurd that it almost broke him. Nice try, buddy. Better luck next time. It was signed, Lieutenant Turner, United States Air Force. Zurich twitched, his frustration turning to disbelief. He had been defeated by the sheer absurdity of it all. Back on Earth, Marshal Jackson's team flew low, their jets weaving through the remnants of the Karaki fleet, which now lay scattered like broken toys. Jackson leaned back in his seat, exhaling slowly. Well, that was fun, he said with a grin. Fun? Tom's voice came through, a chuckle in his tone. I thought we were dead halfway through that mess. But hey, we did it. We did more than that, Jackson replied, shaking his head. We made it fun, and that's something no one else can do. Meanwhile, Zurich sat amid the ruins of his command center, staring blankly at the wreckage of his fleet. He had been defeated by an approach he couldn't comprehend. Chaos, no rules, no method. The humans had beaten him, but worse than that, they had humiliated him. Zurich glanced up at the vastness of space, its infinite emptiness now feeling far more daunting than ever before. Maybe, just maybe, there was something to these humans. Maybe their madness had a method after all. Captain, Ian's voice broke through, his words laced with fear. What do we do now? Zurich continued to stare at the wreckage, his mind processing the complete unpredictability of it all. He exhaled deeply and then, with a resigned sigh, spoke. We go back and we tell everyone to never underestimate the humans. And so, the Karaki fleet began its slow retreat. Humanity had won, in the most unexpected way possible.